Absolutely nothing beats windshield time. Welcome back to Dan the Road Trip Guy, a podcast where we have candid conversations about life lessons learned on the road. I'm your host, Bimmer enthusiast and road trip extraordinaire, Dan Neal. And now, on to the show. I am just thrilled to have a special guest with us today, longtime friend, Juliann Gardner. Welcome to the show, Juliann.
Why, Dan, I can't tell you how happy I am to be with you on the road.
Yeah, for sure. I wish I was on the road. I know you are, but I'm sitting here in beautiful, sunny Cincinnati. So.
Well, we're heading your way, heading south, outside of the Chicago Loop. Windy City is looking gorgeous.
Love it, love it. Hey, I like to give my guest about 2 minutes and 45 seconds, because I do that because I'm at one of my favorite racetracks, and basically a warm-up lap's about 2 minutes and 45 seconds. So I figure, okay, we're going to take a lap around the racetrack. And so who is Juliann Gardner?
It's just great to be here after a lifetime of making various road trips, to be sharing thought, joys, and pleasures about that. I was born in Denver, Colorado, and probably the first road trip I took in my life was when I was 1 year old at the back of my dad's station wagon. It was said that I stood up the whole way and landed in Cincinnati to find you and your wife and your daughter and son in our lives. Probably, what was that? Probably almost 35 years later. How nice is that?
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Being in the Midwest, leaving the West 2 times, once as an infant and then again after I finished up college in Flagstaff, Arizona. I came back to the Midwest. I've always enjoyed traveling back and forth between Flagstaff and Cincinnati or Flagstaff to California. That's a big fun thing to do back then. So road trips were something that started as soon as I could practically drive. Not when I was 16, but at least 18.
Yeah, cool. Remind me what brought you though to Cincinnati? I don't recall.
Well, it was my dad's work. He worked for General Electric, and he originally was with General Electric in Louisville, where he was from, and then he moved his family of 4 at the time, my 3 older brothers and myself, out to Colorado. I was born there, I should say, and then got a transfer with GE back to Cincinnati. His specialty was plastics, coatings on metal parts. GE Aircraft was one of his customers, or one of his great employers, and then he went out on his own, and I was raised in Cincinnati.
Today you're on a road trip. You're traveling back from Wisconsin, and of course we've heard you and Ted both talk about Wisconsin many, many times. And tell us, why Wisconsin? I don't think I ever really knew, where did this Wisconsin thing come from?
Yeah. It's funny. In Cincinnati, so many people go straight up to Michigan. That's kind of the northern reach for a lot of families there. Ted had a seminar in Milwaukee, and I'll just say it changed our lives. We decided to take a family vacation and go up to Milwaukee, but that wasn't really the full family vacation. From there, Ted loved to look at maps. He looked at that peninsula at the northeast edge of Wisconsin, which goes right up into Lake Michigan, and there was an island and a ferry. Well, all of a sudden, this is starting to sound like an adventure. So Ted booked us, and we made our way up what is called Door County. If the adventure wasn't enough, just being in a whole nother climate, a whole nother kind of environment, it was when we got to the ferry that things really clicked. It was like such a great journey to put your car on a ferry and travel across what was considered one of the most treacherous patches of the Lake Michigan area called Death's Door County. There's just a history of many, many shipwrecks across this body of water It lands you on an island that's probably only 7 by 5 miles, and it's called Washington Island. There's a state park up there, and there's a sense of rural simplicity. That's what I would say. And that was just so attractive to me. I was very, very drawn to the agricultural base in Wisconsin. Love the agricultural sort of heritage, which is also in Ohio. But when we got to the island, it was just obvious that there was just historically small farms were there. Their whole thing was growing potatoes in the 50s. Just a simpler way of being. And that we fell in love the first day we were there.
Yeah. More of a minimalist lifestyle, maybe?
I'd put it that way, or unassuming. Let me say that. Not a lot of folderol, not a lot of fudge shops and kite shops. It's a really easy-go kind of environment. You know, as my daughter one time said, there was so little to do, but it would take all day. And we still, to this day, actually enjoy that. I call it kind of a monastery vacation.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm listening to a book right now. It's on happiness, basically. And one of the things he said in there early in the book was, we just have too many choices today. I imagine on Washington Island, it's not too hard to decide where you might go out to eat or what you might do. Is that correct?
Well, it is like that. There's plenty to do, let me say that. But it's so easy to just let the wind blow you from one thing to another. You know, we'll go to a beachside area for a while. Then we'll take a bike ride down and go down around the corner to get an ice cream. Then we'll come back and probably take a nap or crack open a book or take a walk on a preserve or probably, I don't know, get to a glass of wine or a cold beer. You know, all that comes to play.
Yeah. Pretty low stress, you would say?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll reuse the word, unassuming. I mean, being dressed up is being dressed.
Right. Happy in your
nice.
T-shirt, right?
Always. You know, you're overdressed if you've overthought it.
Very cool.
Yeah,
how many hours does it take to get up there from our little town here in Cincinnati?
I say it simply. It's easily, in my mind, a 12-hour trip. But we travel with a puppy, so that involves a few water breaks.
Yeah.
You know, we do kind of do pedal to the metal. Just in the last year, we've started to break up the northern approach to the island and maybe do a little dilly-dally once we get up in the Door County area.
Right.
It's fun. But frankly, the drive from Cincinnati up to Chicago is rather mundane. No thanks to the state of Indiana.
That's right. Yeah.
And then, of course, you got to get around Chicago. Well, that's Chicago's problem and ours.
That's right.
And then from there, it all gets real good.
Yeah.
You can even see it in the trees. You can see it in the fields. I mean, they call it getting north of the stress line or the tension line.
That's cool. And
yeah.
You talked about a road trip out to Cincinnati from Denver, I think. If you think back over your life, excluding the trips up to Wisconsin, any particular road trips, because I love road trips, and of course we're on Dan the Road Trip Guy, any of those road trips that just jump out to you as, you know, so memorable that you can't forget them?
Absolutely. And it does have to do with the first car I owned as well, coincidentally.
Well, that's my next question, so you can tell us about the next car and the road trip then.
Yeah, so the first car I truly owned was a 65 Volkswagen that I bought down in Tucson, Arizona, and we immediately took the old engine out, myself and a boyfriend at the time, and replaced it with a 6-volt system, I think was what we did. And I had this creamy, beautiful little 65 Volkswagen, and I used that as my get-around car between Taos, New Mexico, and Tucson, Arizona, and San Diego. Came across Cincinnati with it as well, brought it back to Cincinnati, and sold it to my brother in Cincinnati, and I swear I still think I see it every now and then. And yet, the happiest or actually the most memorable road trip, where I had this great idea. It was postgraduate. I was in between being a ski bum and summers off, and I called my mom, who was going to come out to San Diego to visit my brother and sister-in-law, and I said, let's go down into Baja, because so many of the people from Taos Ski Valley would go down into Baja and teach windsurfing in the off-season. And so many of the friends that I had from my postgraduate years in Taos would be there. Well, the best part about asking your mother to go on a road trip is she comes with her credit card.
Oh, of
And,
course.
of course. So I drove out to San Diego, and she, with great gumption, jumped right into that little bitty car of ours, mine, and we got down, we go over through, we went in through Rosarita, below San Diego, and we went down, I would say halfway into Baja anyway, to the Yucatan Peninsula area, and, we were filled with adventures, and we did everything you were not supposed to do when you're on a road trip in Baja. We drove after dark, because there's cattle on the roads and all that. We ran out of gas. That was kind of crazy. Duct tape became a very integral part of keeping my car together a few times. That was really such a great time with my mom. She was such a good sport. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, that's great.
We ended up at least one night on the road. We stayed in a hotel that the neighboring sounds were of concern enough that we actually put the dresser in front of the door. And my mom would have said that was one of the most memorable times I think she ever had with one of her kids as well, because it was out of both of our comfort zones. I had no more idea what we were doing than she did. I think it was just, a foreign place and two crazy ladies heading south.
Yeah, best kind of road trip. Yeah, we like to have a plan. We like to have a map, but there are those detours along the way, and a road trip to me it's about the journey. It's not about where you're going. And I rode down with Lauren to Florida a few weeks ago, and we chatted on the way down, and we were kind of like, yeah, this is not really a road trip because we're just trying to get to Florida, and I'm sure when you guys are headed to Wisconsin, it's all about the destination, getting there. But your trip there to the Baja, that was all about the journey. And
yeah, it's just all the things that happen on the way. I will say though, a road trip, even if it's like I-75 for 600 miles, at least it puts the real geography in your blood. Something about flying, you have a disconnect. You kind of go through the whole airport rigmarole, and then you go up, and then you come down, and then you're back out of the airport rigmarole, and you're somewhere else. When you're doing a road trip, you kind of earn arriving.
definitely.
You put all that textural distance in your blood.
Yeah, for sure, no doubt about that. And I'll usually set my phone if I'm not in a big rush and I'm on a road trip. I'll just turn the GPS to say, just avoid the highways, avoid the toll roads, and let's see where we end up. And so that's always fun to do. I did that once on my one-lap adventure, though, and it showed it was going to take us like 24 hours to get somewhere where it should have been like 10, and I'm kind of like, what is wrong with this thing? And finally I told the guy I ride with, Brock Yates, I said, oh, I've got avoid highways on here. He goes, well, you better change that. So, but you're absolutely right. I mean, just driving down to Kentucky when we go down there, it's like, particularly this time of year, everything's green, and you just don't see that when you're in an airplane. So you miss the journey.
No. Well, my father had a term. He was a traveling salesman in his later part of his life as far as a manufacturer's representative. He went all over. And he had a term that he loved to use because he serviced throughout the Midwest. He called it shun piking. In other words, you shun the pike. He was just beguiled by what you would see if you got off the highway. And to this day, I still like the shunpike if
Yeah.
I can, And then I like to put in a little dash of dilly-dally.
Yeah, for sure. You have to do that. You'll miss the sights if you. I often think about where we live here, and you lived on US 50. We still live on US 50, and I don't think people understand that road starts in Maryland and it ends in California. And if you drive that road, you'll see some of the most beautiful country in both directions.
Yeah. And you'll see it on scale. You talk about the type of cars you like to drive. We one time had a Mini Coupe, and I used to say the gauge of the road for the car made all the difference. And we would take this little convertible Mini Cooper down to the windy coal roads, I would call them, in Kentucky, where they go into the coal mining areas. Oh my gosh, they have such beautiful infrastructure on two-lane roads, but perfect for a Mini Coupe, especially with the top down. I didn't enjoy driving the Mini Coupe on the highway. Not that it couldn't handle it, it just wasn't the right gauge.
Nope.
We're in a big Ford or a big Dodge Ram right now, and I feel like I own the road like half of these semis in it.
Yeah, for sure. Because you're pulling a camper too, right? Or no?
Well, we left it up in Wisconsin, thankfully. For the return trip, we don't have anything but the puppy.
Yeah. My whole idea of talking to you started whenever it was, 2 Sundays ago or whenever that was, or I don't know. I saw you at an intersection, and I was just kind of like, oh, there's Ted and Juliann. I gotta talk to them on their way home. So, so hey,
Yeah, we were.
yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, we were just rigged out and ready to get it up here.
Yeah. For the last, I don't know how many years it's been now, you started this business, One Small Garden. Tell me, what drew you to that, and how long's it been? Because honestly, it seems like forever, and it may seem like forever to you, but uh, how'd you get into that love of the earth and gardening? And
Well, it became profound and clear to me when that old saying that a grandparent might have said to you, you are what you eat. When I started looking at not necessarily exactly what I was eating, but more where did what I eat come from, I really just went through a mental transition on focusing on getting what I put in my mouth coming from what I could take more control of. So I ended up getting affiliated with a local farm where I knew what they were doing with their animals and how they were growing. And then one day I wanted to grow for myself, and it wasn't easy. And I didn't understand how this whole idea of having just one small garden in a raised bed could be so profound as far as teaching you the value and the virtue of nurturing a seed to growth to bringing it to your mouth. And that whole experience was such an aha. And I realized if I could experience that, I thought other people should. And, I made an accidental raised bed and hurt myself and went to the emergency room doing that with a handsaw. So the business started when I decided to make a raised bed that would go together with the simplicity of no tools, just a couple bolts and wing nuts and you're on your way. And I thought, you know what, this is a great product, but it's more that people want to learn to grow. But in a small environment, like a raised bed, they can grow enough to learn and grow enough to succeed, but they can actually, one day, if they have that skill within their competence, they could go till their front yard if they wanted to. They could go ahead and own a farm, but to learn in a small way. And that started 15 years ago. And the name and the logo came from a girls' trip when I said, well, it just takes one small garden to go through this experience and learn from it. And then a dear friend of mine from high school, she threw up her hand in that resistance fist. She said, what if it was a trowel in your hand and you're resisting commercial food and you're learning to grow for yourself? I said, that's it. That's how One Small Garden got born.
wow, that's
Yeah, I think
That's
we
very
put
cool.
out I think there's about 700 gardens in the Cincinnati area that are probably still growing for someone somehow.
Well, we hope so, for sure. I grew up pretty much, you talked about tilling up your front lawn. My parents pretty much had their backyard tilled up, and it fed us fresh corn and green beans and onions and tomatoes, and mom would can beans and freeze corn, and so it just kept you going. And yeah, they knew exactly what it was and what they put on it and how they grew it.
Yeah, and I mean, even just this week, I gave something that wouldn't be any bigger than a small cooler, if you will, to someone, and I had in it nothing more than basil, onions, and some lettuce, and one cherry tomato. You know, that's going to be a lot to play with. If she makes pesto and she dices up some onions into a salsa, gets cherry tomatoes, that's all a win.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's great, and we certainly wish you continued success with that. So you're one of, we probably count them on a few fingers, of friends who have visited a country that's special to us, and that's Haiti. I don't remember what year that was that you ventured down to Haiti with us, and I'm just curious what you thought about that trip. And
Oh my gosh. You know, Dan, I don't know if I've ever spoken to you about that. I told Linda several times. That was a life-altering experience to fly into Haiti, a very unassuming tarmac for their airport, going through the itty-bitty chaos of getting through customs there, and then being greeted by, I believe we were in an open pickup truck with a cattle fencing around it to head out to the missionary area that we were staying. And just that was a road trip in and of itself. What a great way to see the community as you arrive in the back of a pickup truck. Oopsie.
hey, that's great. Yeah, I
and,
mean,
and
to me, Haiti, you have to hear it, smell it, really take it in with all your senses. And I think that's
yeah,
one of the things. I was always quick to jump in the back of the truck, and you end up with a little bit of dust on your face, but just to see all that, yeah. So yeah, we've never really talked about that trip much. So
oh, it's such a great experience. And I think where it altered my awareness were two things. I was naive enough to believe that there would be a way to create soil in Haiti, and because of its difficult history, there's just no natural resources remaining, and it's very challenging to bring together nourishing soil there because it's all been abused and lost. And I remember turning to the young lady who was in charge of the rooftop garden, and I was a little surprised to see the containment in a rubber tire of a bell pepper. And she said, you know, Juliann, when you're hungry, you're not too worried about cancer. And that just rattled my cage. I realized you grow where you can, what you can, when you can, and there's no judgment. And I still feel that that's a really important message that I share with other people. Just try growing something that you bring to your mouth and see if it doesn't make you a more whole person. But that came from Haiti.
yeah, oh, that's great.
That was an amazing. I don't think we were there more than 5 days.
No, we weren't. No, that's a typical trip. Yeah.
Yeah, and it truly altered. It was one of those things that recalibrates how you see things from then on, which all travel does. You know, when you get out of your zip code. And while I had done some traveling in other countries, Haiti was such a profound experience.
Well, we appreciate
Really,
you. We appreciate you venturing down there with us, because most people are not that. I don't know if courageous or bold or just have a desire to go. But I think if everybody went, number one, it gives you a true appreciation for everything we have here. Flipping on the light switch or turning on the faucet
oh,
with no outages for the most part. So
exactly. Well, and that was there that I thought, gosh, if each of us could just have a small box of soil, sort of like I just described I gave somebody last week, if each of us could just have a small box of soil, what a difference it would make in our lives. I wish I could send down thousands of little boxes of soil to each of the home residences in Haiti, just so they had that sense of self-empowerment and self-destiny. It's difficult there.
Yep, it is definitely, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Life altering.
This might seem like a morbid question. I don't know. I've always but I think they're good questions. What's one thing you would like to do before you die? Experience a trip, just sit on the porch on Washington Island. I don't know. What's that one thing?
Yeah, on that morbid track. I do.
Well, you could speak to that, right? Maybe a little bit.
I'm just going to say that I do personally kind of live now in the vein of, if this were my last day, is this what I want to be doing? So I do sort of check myself. And I'm old enough now that I don't do a lot of things I don't want to do anymore. So what would I want to be about before I die? I'd like to see a few more things. We got to go to Patagonia, and that was amazing. That wasn't a road trip, but it was quite a trip. And that was just before the pandemic. To hike the mountain, to see the phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'd like to go to Iceland before it melts.
Yeah, that'd be good, right?
I think Linda, I would love to do that. And I'll admit, I'm a cold weather person. So, yeah, like the trip that Linda recently took to Norway.
Norway. Mm-hmm.
I was just beguiled by the beauty of all of that and certainly the coolness of it all. I prefer the northern climate. However, I'd also like to see Vietnam. I don't know why. I hear it's just epically beautiful. It also makes me think a little bit about but being an American and going there to try to understand that healing, which was in my history. That was my war, Vietnam.
Right.
There would be some of that. I think I'd like to see Vietnam or Iceland or Norway, if I have the body to enjoy it,
Yeah, for sure.
Otherwise, I may just end up back on the Missouri on Washington Island.
Which would be just fine, right?
It would be just fine. And, when you're driving on these road trips, to have these things where you go over, let's call them bridges, or you go over gorges, or you go over bodies of water or around bodies of water, that really does make that transition in your mind that you've gone somewhere else.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now the more morbid question. So now you only have 24 hours to live. What are you going to do with it?
Ooh, I'm going to eat something most delicious, probably maybe something I make. I'm going to have a fabulous glass of wine. Hold on. Dog just knocked the window down.
Well, that's great. That's nothing. That's great. Road trip. True road trip.
I know. The dog's participating. I think I might. Well, I'd want to be surrounded with at least my family that loves me or some friends.
Yeah, for sure.
That's about it. Oh, I know what I want. I want to have a sunset at People's Park, and you can look it up. It's on Washington Island. I would definitely be there for sunset.
Okay, so we'll all just meet up at Washington Island and hang out with you. How about that?
Yes, please. If you'll take that road trip, I hope you'll come.
We'll definitely take that road trip.
I think I already promised Linda we'd be together.
Yeah. Well, hey, yeah, that's all I had. I really appreciate, number one, your friendship. Oh, go ahead.
I want to ask you if I'm allowed to ask you a question.
Oh, well, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you going to do this last 24 hours?
Oh, well, somebody asked me that, and I said, I'm going to throw everybody in the car, and we're going to see how far we can get on US 50.
Excellent.
I'm not sure my family's in on that, so I'm not sure who's coming along on that ride. But if I could end it in the car and maybe see some beautiful sunrise when the sun's coming up in Utah or Nevada or California, I think I'd be good to go. So yeah, and I'd like Linda, Lauren, and Henry to be along. I'll have to just like rent some really cool car and go.
Well, you make a point. I have to say, I think you mentioned that your father liked to drive at night as his work.
Yes.
And I also like to drive the nighttime as well, if it's mundane driving. It's really my preference, and I especially like it when you drive into dawn.
Yes. I'm not big on the driving into sunset, but I love, there's something about when the sun is coming up, and particularly if you're in some beautiful part of the country and the sun's coming up, and you can just kind of smell nature. And
yeah.
That's just cool to me. Again, I really appreciate you doing this. This is just kind of a fun project for me, and just something. I think it all started, to be quite honest with you, a lot of this started after my parents died. And I realized after my dad had died and then my mom died just a bit over a year later, and I really quickly realized I had about 101 questions, and I just say 101 because there's always another one. And after they died, I was like, uh-oh, I'm not going to get these questions answered. So I decided I was just going to start reaching out to friends and family and just start chatting with them about, maybe silly type questions, but something interesting that, maybe other people then would go, oh, yeah, we probably should ask some more questions. So
yeah. Well, this is part of a road trip, too. I love the fact that if your podcast goes the way I think it will, people can take a road trip and use conversation about that trip. So it really animates the relationship. It bonds it. I think Jen and Grace took a road trip. There's a whole new interview for you. They went out to San Francisco together, yeah.
Right.
And they also did, I think, like a 5 or 6 day trip around Oregon and Washington State. And that was just a father-daughter trip that they took together, to get her across the country once, and then I think it was a business trip that Ted flew out to join her with a rental car, and off they went.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating.
So next time, Ted, we'll chat about your road trips, okay?
Sounds good, Dan.
And the toy business that you once were a part of. We can talk about that, too.
Yes, sir.
Juliann, before we hang up, I really appreciate this. How do we find One Small Garden?
Yeah, look it up. Word one, smallgarden.com. We're out there on the interweb.
On the interweb.
And hashtag.
Yeah, and you're probably on Instagram, right?
Yeah, Instagram. We hope to be shipping worldwide this fall, so that's coming up.
So does that mean the international headquarters is up on Washington Island now, or is it still in Cincinnati?
Yeah, we like to describe it as our intergalactic headquarters, centrally located in a very remote place.
There we go. I love it. Well, hey, you guys travel safe on the rest of this journey home, and don't get too bored in Indiana flatlands.
We're already in Indiana.
Yeah, we just hit it. I'm sure my bars are going to drop off real quick here.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, enjoyed our time together.
Dan, love talking to you anyway.
Yep. Talk to you soon.
All right. Ciao, baby.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dan the Road Trip Guy, and we look forward to having you back again next time. In the meantime, if you want to find me, you can find me on the internet at Danny, D-A-N-N-Y, Neal, Neal.com. Until we meet up again, keep having conversations and keep driving.